Let's get it started. Fox News alert: President Trump now arriving moments ago in Iowa. This is ahead of an event at a community college. Now, we cannot control the live on the screen, but that was Dubuque. He's now going to travel about 14 minutes or so away from there to the Northeast Iowa Community College in Peosta, where he will hold a workforce development roundtable. We'll bring you this live as it happens. Of course, this is on the heels of his executive order this week. Establishing a President's National Council for the American Worker and American Workforce. We are all over the story as it pops. We'll bring it to you live. Meanwhile, Fox News alert on this. Top House Republicans huddling on Capitol Hill today after a group of GOP lawmakers introduced a resolution to impeach the Deputy Attorney General, Rod Rosenstein. They say they will continue pressuring the Justice Department to comply with document requests instead of forcing a vote today. But they warn the move of impeachment is still on the table. You're watching Outnumbered. I'm Harris Faulkner, here today, Fox Business Network's Dagan McDowell, Republican strategist and senior fellow for the Independent Women's Voice, Lisa Booth, syndicated radio talk show host and Fox News contributor Leslie Marshall. And in the center seat, Fox News senior judicial analyst Judge Andrew Napolitano. We say he's outnumbered. We also affectionately call him Judge Naps.
Happily outnumbered. Good morning. Good afternoon, everybody. Pleasure
Good afternoon.
To be here.
You ready to get with
yes,
it? We need your
about.
Expertise.
Impeachment?
Let's do it. Questions remain over whether a group of 11 House Republicans will force a vote to impeach the Deputy Attorney General, Rod Rosenstein, once they return from their August recess, which starts tomorrow. They introduced a resolution to do just that yesterday, saying the Justice Department has failed to provide requested documents to the congressional committees, and accusing particularly Rosenstein of having a conflict of interest overseeing the Mueller Russia investigation. GOP Congressman Jim Jordan, one of the lawmakers leading the effort, says this.
It might have been 120 years since someone's been impeached, but when was the last time you ever saw the FBI take a disproven document with no credibility, no validity, no corroboration, take it to a secret court, not tell the court who paid for it, not tell the court that the guy who wrote it had been leaking information to the press? When have you ever, and not just once, 4 stinking times, and the last one Rod Rosenstein signed.
Everybody in the party, though, not all on board with impeachment. House Oversight Committee Chairman Trey Gowdy, who has been critical of Rosenstein on these issues, went after the move as too dramatic. And Democrats, of course, say this is all just a big attempt to distract from the Russia investigation. Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Herridge live for us with more in Washington. Catherine?
Well, thanks, Harrison. Good afternoon. A short time ago, the House Speaker Paul Ryan said he does not support the articles of impeachment that were tabled by about a dozen members of the Freedom Caucus. He said he believes that the issue could derail the larger agenda for the party. But he says he still wants the Justice Department to provide withheld records.
It is appropriate that we conduct oversight of the executive branch and that we get full compliance with the executive branch on what are very legitimate document requests. Do I support impeachment of Rod Rosenstein? No, I do not. I don't think we should be cavalier with this process or with this term. Number one. Number two, I don't think that this rises to the level of high crimes and misdemeanors, so a really high standard.
Also this morning, the House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi weighed in.
They would want to hurt Rosenstein so that they could hurt the Mueller investigation. But hopefully saner minds will prevail on the Republican side, and they won't bring this up. If they did, we welcome their voting on undermining our democracy.
These articles of impeachment filed late last night call out the Deputy Attorney General and allege Rosenstein, and this is the important development. They allege Rosenstein has a conflict of interest in the Russia probe because he signed off on the final surveillance warrant renewal for Trump campaign aide Carter Page. That was in June of 2017. It reads in part, Deputy Attorney General Rosenstein's failure to recuse himself in light of this inherent conflict of interest and failure to recommend the appointment of a second special counsel constitute dereliction of duty. Here's Congressman Jordan from last night on the FBI and Justice Department's use of the unverified Trump dossier to secure the Page warrant and also those withheld documents.
We have sent numerous letters to Rod Rosenstein they haven't complied with. 2 subpoenas they haven't complied with. We've caught the Department of Justice hiding information, redacting information that they should not have redacted. We know that Rod Rosenstein threatened House Committee Intel staffers, threatened them, chilling impact when they were trying to do their job, our job of doing the constitutional oversight we're supposed to do.
And as you mentioned, in the last few minutes, multiple sources have told Fox News that there will be no effort to impeach the Deputy Attorney General, have that vote today. But there has been a leadership discussion, and there is agreement that they continue to need to apply this pressure and keep contempt and impeachment on the table, Harris.
Catherine, thank you very much. We bring it out to the couch to get some legal expertise on this. So impeachment now off the table, at least for this session. Maybe it'll pop back up after. You roll your eyes at this, though. Why?
Well, I do roll my eyes at this because impeachment is such a draconian measure, and it's not authorized here. The Constitution lays out the grounds for impeachment, two very specific grounds: treason or bribery. Obviously not the case here. And then an amorphous phrase, which has been defined by the courts and by Congress, as high crimes and misdemeanors. High crimes and misdemeanors means some criminal event committed by the person they want to impeach that strikes at the security of the republic. Failing to recuse yourself on a law enforcement issue that you're supervising and where you might be a witness is at best an ethical violation between the lawyer and the ethics monitors of the District of Columbia Bar or wherever he's licensed. It is not an impeachable offense. So they are really going way overboard. But there's a backstory here. The backstory is when Eric Holder was the Attorney General, and they wanted documents from him on Fast and Furious. Remember that? And he didn't produce him. The House of Representatives produced the documents. The House of Representatives held Attorney General Holder in contempt. And nothing happened. Nothing. They should have taken that contempt citation across the street to a federal judge and had him prosecuted. But nothing happened. So they have a history of doing nothing when they can't get what they're trying to get.
And that's what is behind here. I actually talked to Congressman Andy Biggs this morning about this, who's one of the members behind this. And the decision-making process is the absolute frustration with the DOJ and the FBI slow rolling this process. You look at text messages that popped up and the IG report that were never given to Congress. You look at, the DOJ claiming that things are of the national interest, then come to find out they aren't. So I think Congress is incredibly frustrated. And, what other options are on the table for Republicans in the House or in Congress to try to obtain these documents?
Let me step in there with just this one thing, because this is what some critics inside the Republican Party are saying. If you were really serious about this, you would have actually pulled this trigger earlier this week or even last week, not on the eve of the summer recess.
Right.
But the politics of this were difficult, I would say, for the Freedom Caucus because they squawk a lot. Hold on, Lisa, let me finish. They squawk a lot about rule of order. This actually was not per the protocol.
Correct.
So to go back and get that right, which is what leadership is saying today, actually is not a bad idea. It could still be a pop-up if they don't get what they want post-side of summer recess.
So if Harris is right and what they really want is for all of us to talk about this, they have absolutely succeeded, because obviously we're not the only ones that are talking about it.
I want to get Leslie in
here. Can I just make one more point real quick? So I will say, when you had moderate Republicans try to move forward with the discharge petition, they were praised in the media. Nobody was talking about the fact that they were trying to usurp the regular order, or the fact that they were trying to go, move something forward without committee or undermine leadership.
I want to get Leslie in here because I want to hear what Democrats have to say. Leslie?
I agree with you on this.
We're on the same side on this.
Yeah, we are, because, the Constitution to our nation is like the Bible is to religion, especially Christianity. And when you reread Section 4, Article 2, to your point, when you're talking about high crimes and misdemeanors, you were in a sense putting it in a sentence, even though they're not specifying, with treason, with bribery. This does not fit, in my opinion, the litmus test constitutionally of high crimes and misdemeanors. One, they have 11 people. They need a majority of the House, 2/3 of the Senate. This is going nowhere. It's not just frustration.
I'm reading, though, Leslie, if they can get to the protocol on this, if they can get back to the rule of order, if they can do the things that they need to do, they'll get more than those 11 people. In fact, what the leadership are saying, they fully expect that.
Nobody's ever been removed from the executive branch, from their job, based on impeachment. And the fact, and I look at it very simplistically. Why have Republicans uttering the word, impeachment, when that is a Democrat talking point when it comes to President Trump? It's just on a very basic political level.
Lisa, I think I can make your head pop with this breaking news, because you and I have been talking about Speaker leadership, right? We've been talking about House leadership, so here it is. Representative Jim Jordan, this is per our reporting, Chad Pergram, our producer on the Hill. Jim Jordan, Republican of Ohio, is running for Speaker of the House in the new Congress. Now, We are waiting for him to make an appearance, but I believe we have a statement. Yes. So let me give that. So again, and you see him there on the screen. This is file video. If he pops up, should the American people entrust us with the majority again in the 116th Congress, I plan to run for Speaker of the House to bring real change to the House of Representatives. President Trump has taken bold action on behalf of the American people. I am reading directly from the statement now from Congressman Jim Jordan of Ohio, who wants now to run for Speaker of the House. He goes on to say, Congress has not held up its end of the deal, but we can change that. It is time to do what we said, end quote. Lisa Booth.
Head popped. No, but I don't think that ultimately I think it's going to be someone like Kevin McCarthy or Steve Scalise.
You don't think it'll be him?
I don't think it's going to be.
But, Lisa,
but it does demonstrate how the Republicans are very divided right now, as Democrats are as well.
This is not a popularity contest. This is the quintessential small government Republican gaggle. The same people that are trying to impeach Deputy Attorney General Rosenstein versus the standard run-of-the-mill Republican leadership. This is an ideological battle.
Freedom Caucus.
I don't know why anyone would want this job.
The establishment is Kevin McCarthy. Jim Jordan is Freedom Caucus, small government. You have the small government conservatives and libertarians battling the establishment that has led the Republicans in the House of Representatives.
Yeah, but the difference between that and the Democrats is you've got socialists on one side and that end. That's a little bit different than the Freedom Caucus.
But it's a battle for the heart and soul of the Congress.
But since I'm the finance reporter, I look at the numbers. So here are the numbers.
All right.
Jim Jordan would likely have the backing of 40-plus votes of the conservative House Freedom Caucus. The question is, can Jim Jordan get the 218 votes necessary to win the speakership on the floor? Who does he pull away from a Scalise, from a McCarthy? What happens? Do you need to have somebody, do you need to have them just bow to the Freedom Caucus's wants and wishes because he is running? I have zero idea.
I want to do another head popping moment because
head popping, we like it.
I'll tell you exactly how this happens. Whoever has the least of those three votes, Scalise, McCarthy, Jordan, will determine who the speaker is by where he throws his support.
That's a good point. Okay. I agree with Dagan because I'm into reality and those numbers are realistic. And I agree with you, Lisa. What is this, one time in 2 years?
It's not going to
be Jim Jordan. I know we're not talking about that elephant in the room, but there's some very nasty allegations against him coming out of Ohio, and I don't think some Republicans are going to go near him because of that.
I don't know why anyone wants this job, though.
They're allegations, though.
Being Speaker of the House, this is the worst job ever. Trying to wrangle the party and keep everyone together. Why? Paul Ryan basically had to be begged to take this job. I'm surprised anyone wants it, to be honest.
I just want to stay on the allegations from 30 years ago about when he was an assistant wrestling coach at Ohio State University, about what he did or didn't know about sexual abuse. By running for this, you're asking for the press to basically continue to dig through your garbage in your private life. Rightly or wrongly, that's what's going to happen.
Here's the other elephant in the room, Donald Trump. The current leadership of the Republicans does whatever the president wants. Jordan and company, were he to become the speaker, would push back against the president on many of these big government, high-spending proposals.
Wow.
So Donald Trump, though he doesn't get a vote, has a major say.
But what they're doing with this impeachment proceeding to bring it back home, people say they're doing it to, I mean, the Democrats argue that they're doing it to curry favor with the president of the United States and to keep the focus off of the Mueller investigation.
Because it's a brushback punch against Mueller.
Well, I was going to say the judge is right in the sense of, a McCarthy or a Scalise or someone's going to try to win over the Freedom Caucus in the effort to become Speaker of the House. So perhaps Jim Jordan and the House Freedom Caucus, they're angling for something else to give their votes to, maybe a Kevin McCarthy.
And I know you loved what Lisa said because she started with the judge is right. Okay, we're going to move on. President Trump has arrived in Iowa, in Dubuque, in fact, ahead of that roundtable on workforce development. The economy, the center stage today, and we are going to cover this. It comes a day after he secured an agreement to cool down the escalating trade dispute, at least with the European Union. That matters to a whole lot of people in Iowa and throughout the Midwest. We'll go there live as the president speaks in Iowa. Plus, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo fiercely defending the president's foreign policy during a fiery hearing, where some lawmakers slammed the recent Trump-Putin summit. We'll show you how the secretary did. Stay close.
Just ask you a simple question. Did you can't eat up my 7 minutes, Mr. Secretary. Did he tell you whether or not what happened in those 2 hours?
Do you? This Fox News alert, new reaction to the Secretary of State on Capitol Hill after the White House announced that another summit with Russian President Vladimir Putin will be delayed until next year. White House National Security Advisor John Bolton saying, quote, the president believes that the next bilateral meeting with President Putin should take place after the Russia witch hunt is over. So we've agreed that it will be after the first of the year. This, as during a tense Senate Foreign Relations Committee hearing yesterday, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo squared off with lawmakers over the president's recent summit with Putin and the NATO summit. Watch this.
What is it that causes the president to purposely create distrust in these institutions and what we're doing?
Senator, I disagree with most of what you just said there. You somehow disconnect the administration's activities from the president's actions. They're the one and the same. This is President Trump's administration, make no mistake, who's fully in charge of this, and who is directing each of these activities that has caused Vladimir Putin to be in a very difficult place today.
I notice that you are not responding to what I'm saying.
I think I responded to everything that you quoted, Senator.
It's the president's public statements that create concern amongst senators on both sides of the aisle.
The ranking Democrat on the committee, Senator Bob Menendez, also clashing with Pompeo.
When he had a chance, did he confront Putin and say, we don't recognize your annexation of Crimea?
The president was very clear with Vladimir Putin about U.S. positions.
And he told you that?
Senator, I'm telling you what he had a conversation with Vladimir Putin about, and I'm telling you what U.S. policy is today. I understand, Senator, I understand the game that you're playing.
No, Mr. Secretary, with all due respect, I don't appreciate you characterizing my questions.
Senator, presidents are permitted to have conversations with their cabinet members that aren't repeated in public.
Pompeo also defending the president's recent summit with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, amid new signs of progress today as the regime is reportedly preparing to return the remains of U.S. servicemen killed in the Korean War as early as Friday. Lisa, given that note, I watched part of that hearing yesterday and thought to myself, Lord have mercy, doesn't this man have more to do with his time than sit in front of these lawmakers? And it's a waste of our time as well.
It's got to be painful to sit in front of the committee and take some of those questions. But I actually thought he did a really phenomenal job. And what I think he did that was so important is reiterating the fact that this president has been very tough on Russia and much tougher than the previous administration. And Senator Marco Rubio, who's been a critic of President Trump on foreign policy issues, admitted as much. He even said at the committee yesterday that President Trump's been tougher than any other president since the end of the Cold War. So I think that was important for Pompeo to point that out. I also thought there was an interesting exchange with Senator Jeanne Shaheen because she was basically very complimentary of what they're doing in Syria right now. And Mike Pompeo's response was, oh, so you like what this administration is doing? Those are the policies of this administration. So I thought he was great for reiterating and making it more clear what this administration has been doing on that front.
I thought his harshest critic yesterday was the Republican chair of the committee, and you just played the tape of Senator Bob Corker asking very profound questions that go on both sides of the aisle. The president says things that causes chaos, and the president doesn't tell the people around him what's going on. Director of National Intelligence Dan Coates has to find out in Aspen, Colorado, in front of a bunch of lefties that he's trying to persuade, that Vladimir Putin is coming to the White House. The president didn't tell Mike Pompeo or presumably didn't, what he and President Putin even spoke about.
But let me
These
stop
are things that drive senators crazy.
But let me stop you there. I'm going to channel my best Melissa Francis and say it's the walk, not the talk. And the walk is that Mike Pompeo said the U.S. doesn't recognize Russia's annexing of Crimea. Sanctions won't be relieved until Russia leaves Crimea. Our approach has been the same, to steadily raise the cost of aggression until Putin chooses a less confrontational
That's the
policy.
right thing to do.
And there could be additional targeted sanctions that would prove
but the problem is, and I hear you on the walk and I hear you on the talk, but prior to the Secretary of State saying that, I think that the American people, regardless of their party, were very confused. The president said, and I quote, "Crimea is Russian." The president says that he didn't see any reason why Russia was responsible for hacking the elections in 2016. On one day, on another day, he says something else, which is very confusing to the American people and confusing as to where does his loyalty lie if you're attacking our intelligence agencies, but you're applauding a guy who gives them a soccer ball with a transmitter in it.
But Harris, where I grew up, we say money talks and walks.
Well, the American people look to him to be the leader of this nation.
Sanctions are money. Sanctions are hitting them where it hurts. Sanctions that we put in place earlier this year were on Putin's cronies and their businesses.
So
and then we invite him to our home.
Russia's place in the world is really what's key here. And you talked about Shaheen. She was on with me yesterday on Overtime, the senator and also the Republican Senator Barrasso. And they were talking about what they would be asking in that Foreign Relations Committee hearing. And I heard a lot of sameness. I heard a lot around the issue of not just what went on in the last summit, but how is the next summit going to be different? Now, I pressed, should there be more people in the room? This was before we learned that it won't be happening. It doesn't matter when it happens, whether it was going to be, in the fall or it's going to be at the first of next year, whenever it is. Is there going to be a relook at who sits in the room and how they do it? Secretary Pompeo, one second, Judge. Secretary Pompeo was the right person to take those questions yesterday. I think both sides of the political aisle were tough. Bob Menendez, you saw him.
Yes.
You saw a lot of tough questions that actually need to be asked at this point. But I would say this. Pompeo is the man who made North Korea happen in terms of getting everybody to the table. Remember, he met with their top spy chief just ahead of being nominated as the Secretary of State.
I got to say that this, in defense of Secretary Pompeo, no Secretary of State enjoys sitting there and being badgered about what did the president tell you and what did you tell the president. So his non-answers are really what he's there to do, to preserve the confidentiality of his communications with the president.
But I want to raise one issue. So there is not going to be a summit between President Trump and Putin until the new year. That has to be a relief for any Republican running for election or re-election come November.
Sure, that's the reason they delayed it.
That's the reason. But let's focus on the economy and to that Aspen Security Forum that you were talking about. We know that at least 3 congressional candidates there have been attempted hacks by Russia on them. So you wait to see what happens. Because of Microsoft, you wait to see what happens.
That's a good point. So it isn't just the politics. We have to see if we've gotten it right to protect our elections against whomever it is, the Russians or whomever.
But another thing Pompeo made clear yesterday, too, is because people are complimentary of some of the actions. Guess what? That's President Trump. Who do you think is president of the United States right now? President Trump. So the decision-making on Russia and the actions of this administration reflect him because he is the president of the United States. So I thought it was good that that was reiterated yesterday as well.
And the American people saw Mike Pompeo and said, Trump's lucky to have him as Secretary of State at this point.
There you go.
It's deadline day for the Trump administration as it works to reunite thousands of migrant children separated from their parents, their families. This as tempers reportedly flare during a closed-door meeting between Kirstjen Nielsen and Democrats. The details ahead.
We understand that the president, in the next short little while, will be at the community college in Iowa, this northeast college there. We are awaiting him to take the lectern, and he is going to be touring the campus first, and then the roundtable discussion on workforce development, which you see in the center of the stage. So he'll tour the campus, and then that event up on the dais. Actually, there's not a lectern. This comes one day after agreed with the president of the European Union for both sides to pull back from a trade war. Here's the president yesterday.
We agreed today, first of all, to work together towards zero tariffs, zero non-tariff barriers, and zero subsidies on non-auto industrial goods. Thank you. And the European Union is going to start almost immediately to buy a lot of soybeans. They're a tremendous market. Buy a lot of soybeans from our farmers.
Meanwhile, Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross is defending the administration's trade tactics, saying the White House is working to reverse some very old policies that are no longer relevant.
It took us since World War II to get to the current unfortunate trade deficit. Right after World War II, American public policy was rebuild Europe, rebuild Asia. Those were good then, but should have been time limited. So it's a lot of history that we have to deal with. What we now need is to lower the barriers that they were permitted to erect relative to us.
You know, I want to start off and maybe not get too deep into the numbers here, but just kind of a baseline and then talk politics. We can always come back to the numbers.
But basically, that's a warning to me.
Yeah, but I know sometimes we'll kind of get there and
She's
we don't.
the queen of numbers.
Should we have been surprised at all about the EU situation, considering when the president and the European Union president came out first, Juncker said, you know, we see some ground here where we can come together. I'm paraphrasing, but it sounded positive before the deal was even made.
The fact that Jean-Claude Juncker went to the White House in the first place was a sign that there was something positive was going to come out of this. This was a de-escalation of trade tensions with Europe. It was a tariff truce, if you will. One of the most important things, it looks like right now we've pulled away from the idea that we're going to slap tariffs on automobile imports into the United States from Europe. Even bigger picture, if China's the real enemy, the country that steals our intellectual property, and they force the surrender of technology on Americans, and they cheat around the globe, we can now potentially lock arms with Europe, lock arms with our allies, and take on China one by one. The steel and aluminum tariffs are still doing great damage to small U.S. manufacturers. Even big companies are getting hit by these tariffs. GM, Ford, Coca-Cola is even going to raise prices
in the center part of our country.
The farmers, because of the retaliation from China, they also agreed, Europe did, to buy more soybeans and to buy more liquefied natural gas. That was good news. So I don't want to act like this was bad news.
You just described the president's base in the Rust Belt and the Corn Belt, and he cannot afford to antagonize them by making their businesses less profitable and their household expenses more costly if he hopes to keep the House of Representatives in November.
Congressman Sean Duffy of Wisconsin, a whole lot of dairy farmers there, said to me yesterday on the air that, you cannot alienate those Trump supporters because they hinged on the very issue of jobs.
Right.
And so if you kill what their livelihood is, they'll hinge right back and become more independent, potentially end up in Leslie Marshall's camp if they can get out of socialism. We'll have to see if that can work. You know what I find interesting about Democrats right now, though?
Do the Democrats want the tariffs because it'll bring them votes?
No, the Democrats have wanted tariffs, quite frankly, for years. I mean, if you listen to the union messages, and Democrats are very pro-union, they have been screaming for over a decade. We have been in a trade war for over a decade. We have had a deficit, a trade deficit, which does not benefit the United States. I agree with you with regarding China. They're our number one enemy, if you will, with regard to trade. And I think that we need this power with the EU, and both sides benefited yesterday because the United States needs the EU.
I was going to say, I thought the Democrats were interesting on this because they were kind of letting the Republicans battle it out in those states where the president has such a wide base.
Right.
Real quickly, let's get to some breaking news if we can. I told you that the president is on the ground at Northeast Iowa Community College in Piasta. And now he is getting his tour on that community college. Today is a day about the American worker. This follows his executive order in recent days establishing a President's National Council on the American workforce and the American worker. Policy advisory board that he has set up. He will tour this advanced manufacturing laboratory at this community college. And it includes a demonstration. Are we going to get to see the robotics on camera? I don't know how fast this tour goes. And we don't have a whole lot of audio. Can we dip in? I'm not sure if we can. But gosh, when they get to the robots, that's always the exciting part. And then after that is the part that we all want to watch for. This president will talk about the economy and his vision for American workers. We won't miss a beat. Let's take a quick commercial and come back. You stay with Outnumbered.
My father passed his truck down to me.
Now, and this reporting happening by the New York Times. Robert Mueller in his Russia investigation now widening the scope yet again to include now the president's tweets. He's looking at obstruction in his inquiry. And what he's looking at is the tweets that the president has put out against former FBI Director James Comey and Attorney General Jeff Sessions. Those now are coming into play for the Robert Mueller investigation, according to the New York Times. Judge Andrew Napolitano is right on time, as always, with breaking news. And I have heard you say, well, they're not really looked at by anyone. They are kind of a thing that the president puts out. That actually has changed on the record, as far as we know, in recent weeks.
Yes.
These would be older than that.
Right. The Supreme Court, we talked about this during the break, when it upheld the president's travel ban, decided not to look at his statements as a candidate. That we know. The court's not going to look at what a person said before the president. Will the court look at, if there is litigation over this, what the man says as president? Yes, Bob Mueller knows that those tweets are a treasure trove and a window into Donald Trump's thinking. So here's the allegation. And apparently this story is true because Rudy Giuliani, the president's chief lawyer, has verified it because he's quoted by the New York Times as having spoken to them about it. The allegation is this. Did the president send messages to people of threats or rewards via his tweets? People whom he knew or expected would be interviewed by Bob Mueller. And if he did, was he engaging in witness tampering, which is an independent crime? It's a species, it's a part of obstruction of justice.
Well, we know all about that with Paul Manafort.
Yes. Yes, so that's what the New York Times is breaking, and that's what we're talking about here.
I still can't get past.
Let me just get the Giuliani quote in here, since the judge referenced it. So he did speak, Rudy Giuliani, to the New York Times. Quote, "If you're going to obstruct justice, you do it quietly and secretly, not in public." He was referring to more typical obstruction cases where prosecutors will focus on measures taken in private, like bribery, destroying evidence and things like that. But that is the one initial quote from Rudy Giuliani in this article.
But I still think Judge Ellis, I still firmly believe what Judge Ellis has said in the Manafort case.
That's the trial judge in the Manafort case.
Yes, that basically Mueller is gunning for impeachment or prosecution here, because we were talking about Rod Rosenstein earlier. That's the same guy. And speaking of conflict of interest, this is the guy who laid out the case for firing James Comey and then appointed a special counsel to look at things like obstruction of justice. You look at James Comey's own
but in the Manafort case, wasn't there like a ton of evidence that he actually was doing what they were saying? In fact, didn't they stick him back in the poke?
But not in relation to Russia interference.
Yeah, I mean,
having nothing to do, but having nothing to do with Russian interference. James Comey's own memos demonstrate that President Trump told him to investigate, to get to the bottom if any of his people did anything wrong. The Inspector General's report lays out the case against James Comey's firing as well.
Piece is about. The New York Times piece is about examining anew the tweets and whether what appear to us to be the president's tweets are actually messages to human beings that he knows are going to testify, and do those messages contain a threat or a reward. If they do, that could be witness tampering. That's at least what the New York Times is saying.
I wanted to ask you, Judge. I wanted to ask you, in addition to public attacks, which we have seen by the president on Twitter, does it pose a problem for the president that there have been tweeted his offers of pardons and also ideas of pardons surrounding individuals?
Look, the president can pardon whoever he wants for any federal crime, even a federal crime not yet committed, as the Richard Nixon case. The issue is there a pattern in these pardons intended to send a message to people who are going to testify against the president before Bob Mueller's grand jury, and would he influence that testimony?
I would like to just step in here with a couple of those tweets. Attorney General Jeff Sessions has taken a very, all caps, weak position on Hillary Clinton's crimes. Where are emails and DNC server and intel leakers? And that was back on July 25th, almost exactly a year ago now, in 2017. A day later, the president doubled down, criticizing both Mr. Sessions again and Andrew McCabe, who was the acting FBI director at the time. Why didn't AG Sessions replace acting FBI Director Andrew McCabe, a Comey friend who was in charge of Clinton investigation, but got ... And that was exactly a year ago today, July 26, 2017. So to Lisa's point, I mean, some of this has been out there. Some of this we have seen.
These things are innocuous. There's no suggestion of a crime in these.
I don't understand how it works into. You'll have to explain it. Just how does this work into Mueller's thing about obstruction? I mean, I see Lisa's question now. When you really drill down on the tweets, what's there?
Well, the Times suggests usually prosecutors will look for one slam dunk piece of evidence. Right. I can recall many single emails that someone who was prosecuted sent, like Frank Quattrone, eventually exonerate, clean up those files.
They must be looking for a pattern.
They're looking for trying to stitch together episodes.
Yes.
So that would tweets on top of other things, encounters, other pieces of evidence to build a case.
The most dramatic news here is to contradict what Rudy Giuliani said about 4 months ago in this building, that the Mueller team had given up the ghost on obstruction of justice. Not only have they not given up the ghost, they have a new rabbit hole down which to go. And in that rabbit hole are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of tweets that came out of the president's mouth.
All right, let's move on. This is breaking news this hour. We have the president in Iowa talking about the American workforce. That is breaking news this hour. The tour has wrapped up, and that means next up we will see the president of the United States in a roundtable talking about jobs. President Trump taking aim at Twitter for alleged bias against prominent Republicans on the platform, the reported evidence, and how Twitter is responding. A lot of tweeting and some talking here on Outnumbered. Stay close. The event is about to start now. The President of the United States at the Northeast Community College in Iowa today talking about the American workforce and the American worker after he formed that council via executive order on those very topics. Ivanka Trump, Job Force and Economic Development Advisor and daughter to the president, is there. Secretary Ross, the governor of Iowa, a full round table to talk about these issues. And so let's watch and listen together as the president is talking jobs.
Pulling off something that you've been looking forward to for many years, and that's the 12-month E-15 waiver. We're getting very close to doing it. It's a very complex process. And I stuck with ethanol, and most other candidates they weren't there, right? To put it mildly. But Kim and Terry Branstad, who's right now you're a great ambassador to China. Right. We could not have put him in a more auspicious location, or a more important location, from the standpoint that Terry is out there doing a really not an easy job. But I think in the end it's going to work out very well. It's going to be something special. I want to thank Secretary Wilbur Ross for being here, Secretary Alex Acosta, Wilbur, Alex, Governor Kim Reynolds. I guess one of the reasons I liked Terry, he was the longest serving governor in the history of the United States, I think 24 years, and he was sort of semi-newly elected again. And I said, how about this? Let's see. First, I had to figure out who is the lieutenant governor. And I knew it was Kim. And I said, she'll be a great governor. She's turned out to be better than a great governor. You have, and Rod told me that. I said, Rod, how's she doing? And he said she's phenomenal, right? Absolutely. He said she's phenomenal, and she really has been. You're number one in almost every category. You're in the top 3 in jobs. You're in the top 3 in employment. You're number 1 state. I think they just came out. Number 1 state.
You won't let me write with you.
Those are, that's right. Those are very bad sound bites for whoever you're running against. I don't know who you're running against, but I can tell you that's not easy. When they rate you number 1 state for a lot of things, especially on an economic basis, the job you're doing, Kim, has been fantastic. And I can tell you, I spoke to Terry recently. We speak a lot, and he thinks you're doing a great job. So thank you very much.
Thank you. We appreciate the tax cuts.